Welcome to Coach Bennett's podcast, where every run has a purpose, where kindness is hardcore, where this is about running, and this is not about running, where every starting line is a finish line in disguise, where rambling still gets you where you need to be, where pineapple will never ruin your pizza, and the sodas, adult and not adult kind, are always cold, and where there is room on the starting line for everybody. I'm Coach Bennett. Thank you for letting me be a part of your day. Let's get started. Welcome to episode 74 of Coach Bennett's podcast. That's right, we're racking them up at this point, and I don't know why I'm saying at this point. It's basically one a week, although I will tell you this, there's a really good chance that there's going to be an extra special, small little podcast. I think it quantifies or qualifies, I guess, as a podcast. It's going to be maybe like a 5-minute pep talk or a 10 or 15-minute kind of conversation to be used really as that pre-race shakeout run, the day before kind of shakeout run, where I'm going to talk to you a little bit, and yet it's more or less going to be a pep talk. It's going to be about getting you in the right frame of mind, but I'm now talking about something else, and I'm not talking about this episode, which, like I said, is episode 74, but I'm really excited about that little special one that we're going to sneak in there probably on Friday, okay? Probably on Friday. Now, if you're listening to this podcast, episode 74 of Coach Bennett's podcast, a month from now, 6 months from now, from when it actually was published, you're probably like, what are you talking about? Well, it'll just be the next episode in the list of episodes. It'll be between 74 and 75, because I'm probably not going to call it episode 75. I'll probably call it special episode shakeout run or special pep talk episode or something like that. But anyway, I'm just excited. I'm excited. Maybe I shouldn't be talking about it right now. Maybe I should be getting right into episode 74, but what can I say? I'm pumped about it because there are some big races coming up, not just this weekend. And if I can date the episode a little bit, this weekend is the New York City Marathon, but there's also big cross-country races. There's road 5Ks. There's ultras going on. There are people that are taking on big workouts. They've probably got big presentations or huge exams that they've got to take or conversations that they've got to get through. The point is, there's always something big going on, and sometimes what you need is to get your head right, and you need somebody to tell you, you know what, you're enough. And that's going to be the point of that special little episode. But that's for later. For right now, let's talk about episode 74. Oh yeah, do you need to do more? Maybe that's the answer. And it's probably yes, actually. The answer is most likely yes. Do you need to do more? Now, there could be a subtitle to this. And if you've listened to some of my guided runs, if you've read some of the stuff that I write, whether it's in Coach Bennett's newsletter or I'm putting it up on, Instagram as a post or as a reel, you've probably heard me talk about this. So you kind of know already what the subtitle is. Now, if you haven't done any of those things, this is exciting. Whew, can you feel your heart rate kind of like starting to pick up because you're like, what comes next? I mean, do you need to do more? What is that subtitle you keep alluding to? The answer is yes, but it just might not be more of what you think. Because this is, let's be honest, this is a running podcast. Yes, this is about running. And yes, this is not about running, but it's also about running. And it's also not about running. But you get my point. It's about running, and it's not about running. All right. I'm now becoming overly redundant, and I'm getting very close to being really annoying. But you know what I'm saying. So the usual suspects that I know people are talking about when they say, hey, coach, do I need to do more blank? I know what they're referring to. They're referring to only a few things. Do I need to run more mileage, meters, or minutes? Okay, so there's volume. We'll just quantify that as volume of running. Do I need to run more days? Which is kind of like a tangent of what that means. Do I need to run more mileage, meaning like I normally run a 5K a couple days a week. Do I need to run more than a 5K a couple days a week? Or do I need to run more days? Okay, so we'll lump in minutes, meters, miles, and days kind of under volume. That's one aspect of it. Or do I need more intensity? And what they mean by that is do I need to be doing more speed work, or even within the speed work, do I need to be doing more intense speed work? Does the pace need to be faster? Does the volume of the speed work need to be greater? So it's not just the intensity, but also do I need to also increase the volume of the intensity? So instead of doing it at this pace, it needs to be faster, or it needs to not only be fast or faster, but there needs to be more volume of the fast or faster. They may mean, do I need to do more strength training? Now, if this is like Family Feud style, if you've ever watched Family Feud, they usually do basically like a survey of 100 people. They ask the question, and then your job is to figure out what's the highest ranking answers, right? So strength training is not 1 or 2. If this was a Family Feud style question, it might be 3, right? The other one, I'll say the fourth one here, I mean, for lack of a better term, I'm going to say focus. The athlete may say, do I need to focus more? Or, to put it a little bit differently, do I need to be more serious about my running? Now, before I get into some of the answers that you may not be expecting, let's just focus on these 4 first. Okay, so Family Feud style, I would say from top to bottom, the most popular answer here when someone's wondering, like, well, what do you think I mean by do I need to do more? It's going to mean straight up volume, minutes, meters, miles, or days of running. Now, the answer might be yes. Maybe you do need to run more. Now, of course, all of this relies on what is your goal. What is the goal here? Are you trying to run a marathon? Are you trying to run your first 5K at a certain pace, faster than a PB in the 10K? Are you trying to get out of it that has something less to do with performance, in the more classical sense of a faster time or a further distance? Are you trying to increase the amount of activity, physical activity in your week? Are you trying to increase confidence? Are you trying to increase the amount of times you're getting out of the house and putting yourself in a position to challenge yourself? Is there a goal, a certain number of days you want to run during the week or minutes you want to run during the week? So there's a lot of things that are going to begin with, what's the goal? So I the reason why I'm bringing that up, it seems obvious, but a lot of people ask, should I be doing more? And they don't even know why they should be doing more. Because when I ask them, well, what are you trying to do? A lot of times they say, well, I've been running, and I'm just wondering, do I need to run more? Well, then I usually ask a follow-up question, which is, well, why? Why do you think you need to do more? What are you not experiencing now that you want to experience? Or what are you not accomplishing now that you'd like to accomplish? Or is there a certain goal that's in the back of your mind that you want to have at the front of your mind? And this is super important because we often don't dig deep enough. All right? We often don't dig deep enough. I always think about that we kind of fall into these discoveries, like whether it's dinosaur bones or whether it's like an old city that we didn't know existed because somebody decided to dig deep enough and then we found it. There are so many things that are covered in dust, and if we can just, that's me, I don't know if the blowing of the mic actually comes through, because sometimes when I make certain noises on the mic, like I try to do weird noises, almost like scat stuff, it just doesn't show up, probably because they assume I don't mean to do it, but I did mean to make like a blowing noise of blowing the dust off of like the cover of an old book, or really it was supposed to infer the fact that you're trying to just dig a little bit deeper, but we often don't do that. And as a result, we don't ask ourselves the questions we need to ask ourselves to understand why are we asking the initial question. And from a coaching perspective, for all of you out there that are coaches, and by the way, you've probably heard the phrase from Bill Bowerman, the great Oregon coach from the 60s and the 70s that said, and one of the founders of Nike, said, if you have a body, you're an athlete. Well, I say if you have a heart, then you're a coach. And everyone can and should be a coach to someone. And the reason why is everyone has a lived experience. Everyone has an earned wisdom. And they can share it in a way to help serve people become better in some way. So that counts as a ramble. And I know I try to limit myself to only a few rambles each show. So that counts as one. So if you're counting my rambles, go ahead, put it down. That's one of them. My point, though, is for all of you prospective coaches or current coaches or soon-to-be coaches or longtime coaches, when you get asked a question, the answer or an answer is not always the best response. Sometimes the best response is a question. So you can get closer to the real answer that the athlete wants, the individual in front of you wants, the student wants, your friend really wants. Don't be afraid to ask follow-up questions, because I'll tell you what, sometimes the best answer is dependent on better questions first. So when someone asks me, should I do more? And in this case, it's minutes, meters, miles, or days of running. Yes, I'm going to ask why. Why are you asking me this question? And I'll tell you what, again, if we go Family Feud style, a lot of times it's because people experience progression in the sport. If you use yourself as an example, think about your progression in the sport when you actually started to run consistently. Whether that means consistently 5, 6, 7 days a week or consistently 3 days a week, it doesn't matter. When you felt like you had running consistently a part of your life, remember that progression. Remember when suddenly when you went out for a shorter run, your shorter runs were suddenly longer than your longest runs a few weeks or months ago? And that feeling of progression, where suddenly that movement forward you're associating with more running, more minutes, more meters, more miles. Think about that progression in terms of pace. When suddenly your slowest runs are faster than some of your earliest, fastest runs were. So again, you're measuring that pace as more speed. And for some people, they're equating more speed with better running. So it's totally natural for someone to get to a point where they suddenly realize, okay, I've been running consistently. I've been experiencing this progression, these great achievements, these mile markers and meter posts where it's like, okay, I'm moving forward. There is marked difference between how I started and where I'm at. I am achieving, at least I feel like I'm achieving and accomplishing more success, which is awesome. So it makes total sense to have this conversation with yourself or with a coach. Do I need to be doing more? But let's make sure we are getting specific about why you feel this. And if it's, I want to continue to experience progression and I'm starting to plateau. So I haven't been bumping up my mileage. I haven't been bumping up the intensity. I haven't been bumping up the frequency of days that I'm running. All of this makes sense. It's a great question. And it also means that there's something about running that is making you feel good. Okay? And I want to make sure we acknowledge that. I want to make sure that we say, hey, it sounds to me like you're open to more running because you want more of this. And we'll just call it success, defined in a lot of different ways. But how does that make you feel? It makes me feel really good. It makes me feel confident. It makes me feel excited. Gives me more energy. Like these are the things you want to be hearing, whether you're having this conversation with yourself or with a coach. You want to hear yourself saying these things. And as a coach, you want to hear the athlete saying these things back to you. Because what you want to do when you're having a conversation where someone's asking you, should I do more? You want to make sure that that need, that want, that desire to do more is grounded in positive things, beneficial things that lead to great feelings, happiness, joy, confidence, like I mentioned earlier. These are the things you want to hear. Because then, if we have to have a conversation later on, which I'll tell you what, we're going to have later on in this podcast, about more of maybe different things that don't show up on that Family Feud board, you're going to want to go back to those original desires, needs, wants, goals that you had set. I want to be more confident. I want to experience more joy. I want to be having more fun. These are the things you want to go back to and say, okay, well, maybe it's more of something different and not more minutes, meters, miles, and days of running. Now, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but sometimes it's good to have that foundation, or at least that knowledge of where we're going, so you can start putting things together as we go. All right? So, yes, let me start with, maybe it is. Maybe it is more of those things. And it may be because you say, you know what, I've consistently been running, and I've run some 5Ks in a row. As you know, we've been celebrating that you ran your first 5K without stopping, and that felt real good. And you even ran an 8K without stopping, and that felt amazing. And you've been a part of the community now, and you're going on group runs, which is good. And you've incorporated some speed runs, which were super fun. And you know what? Now you want to run a fast 5K. You want to sign up for a road race, and you want to do a fast 5K. So for you, it's no longer just about covering distance. It's no longer just about being a part of a community. It's no longer just about experiencing different types of runs. You want to race, and you want to put yourself in a position where you can race a full 5K and not just run a 5K. I get it. Fantastic. Awesome. That's where we can sit down and say, hey, you know what? Actually, you do need to run some more. Now, it's not going to be this giant uptick in mileage, because there should never be a really quick giant uptick in mileage. Here's a little PSA, public service announcement for you. A significant number of injuries are simply caused because people pick up the volume too quickly. They increase the volume too quickly, or they increase the volume of intensity too quickly. And as a result, the body is incapable of handling such an aggressive increase in volume or intensity, and the body's not strong enough to deal with it, and the body gets hurt. So it's never going to be that. But yes, we are going to intelligently increase the volume of your training and intelligently increase the volume of intensity in your training so you can race a full 5K. And it's going to seem very similar to how you started running and how you very intelligently ran a certain number of days, and you made sure that the recovery from those days was intentional and intelligent. We're going to make sure that you're not doing silly things like doing speed workouts back to back, that the volume of your long run day is going up 1, 2, 3 weeks in a row, and then we're going to back off a little bit so you can actually soak up some of the work and you can recover. We're going to have diversity in our training so that you can stay healthy and make sure that the running is fresh and you're not going stale as a runner. So the ingredients and how we do it isn't going to change. But yeah, it seems like because of your goal, and your goal is coming from a really good place, you're going to need to do more. So Family Feud style, yes, those top answers, they make sense. And as you increase the mileage, the intensity is going to increase. Because remember, intensity just doesn't mean how fast you're running, all right? A long run is a lot of intensity. Now, again, it's spread out in a very different way than intervals. But intervals, I mean, you can show up at the track, you can do everything you want to do, and you can be out of there in 40 minutes. And sometimes your long run is 2 hours long for some people. And for those of you that are just starting and you're thinking like, my longest run ever is 15 minutes, that's awesome. And someday your long run may be 2 hours. Someday you may look back and say, I never ran 2 hours in my life, and I had an unbelievable, wild, lifelong love affair with running. That's awesome too. I'm just using these as examples. The point is that there is a level of intensity, meaning effort, that is demanded when you're running long. It's not always about how fast. This is actually something I had a great conversation with Coach Bennett, the grader. That's Tammy from the Show Up Society, my wife, the other day, where we were saying, running a 6-hour marathon is really, really hard. A lot of people always think like, oh, geez, breaking 2:30 in the marathon must be really difficult. It absolutely is difficult. You know what else is difficult? Running for 6 hours in a row. That's also really difficult. It's very hard to say which is harder because they are both so hard, and they're so hard for very different reasons. Yes, getting in shape to run 2:30 when you have the talent and you have the fitness and you have the health to do that, that's really difficult. 2 hours and 30 minutes for 26.2 miles. That is really difficult. But I'll tell you what, The athletes that run 2 hours and 30 minutes, I would imagine, I'm throwing a number out here based on nothing other than just a guess, 99.9% of them have never, ever run 6 hours in a row. And the idea of running 6 hours in a row at the level of effort it takes a 6-hour marathoner to run a 6-hour marathon would be overwhelming, and they would probably, and I would say rightfully so, be very upfront and say there's just no way they could do it. There's just no way that they could maintain that level of focus, that level of concentration, that level of grit for 6 hours. So remember, there are lots of different types of efforts and intensities within running. Not everything is based on speed, raw speed. Remember, my 1,500 meter pace is different than your 1,500 meter pace, but if you're running your correct 1,500 meter pace and I'm running my correct 1,500 meter pace, it should feel the same. It should feel the same. That's how it goes. Based on my fitness, this is my 1,500 meter time. Based on your fitness, this is your 1,500 meter time. When we both go out and try to run to our potential, it should feel the same. That's one of the best parts about this sport. So, yes, when I'm talking about the increase in intensity, I'm talking about a couple of things. It can be the volume to a certain extent on things like long runs, the length of your tempo runs, things like that. It can also just mean the intensity of your speed work. There may be a higher volume of speed work, or the speed work may be faster. Now, this is, again, pretty obvious stuff, and I think most people would understand that, yes, this is really, there's a good chance this is what our conversation is going to be if you were to come up to me and say, do I need to do more? Now, coinciding with that is, yeah, you're probably going to have to do more strength training too. I mean, because you have to be stronger than the work you're doing. And I would say that needs to lead your training. If you are not physically capable of taking on the training, then you should not take on the training. This is how you get hurt. So you can be as intelligent as you want to be from a running perspective of increasing your mileage, but if you are not increasing the athleticism and the strength of your body, then it's not going to be able to take on the work you want to take on, and that's going to lead to injury. It could mean, like I mentioned earlier, focus or a level of seriousness. And by seriousness, I don't mean that you are taking the fun out of the equation. This is really important, and I want to touch on this, especially for the coaches out there. Because a lot of times coaches think if this team is going to be good, if this athlete is going to be great, they need to have less fun and be more serious. That is complete and total BS. There is no reason why the level of seriousness of a team or an athlete needs to be in direct correlation to how little fun they're having. You don't need more seriousness and be like, well, we got to get rid of something. What should we throw out of the plane? Well, throw out the fun. No. In fact, what you need to do is make sure as the level of focus and, for lack of a better term, seriousness increases, the love, the joy, and the fun does not diminish, does not go down, and, if anything, only increases. Because as you ask athletes to sacrifice more and more, whether that's time, whether that is mental energy, whether it's physical effort, which means they're going to be sacrificing some of their energy throughout the day, as you ask them to put more mental focus on this task, goal, team, remember, they have to feel like the sacrifices they're making to accomplish this goal are worth it. And to be honest with you, the best teams and the best athletes will probably say the sacrifices I make are worth it because what I get out of those sacrifices is way greater than what I give up. So yes, I may have to give up my Friday nights so I can do these long runs on Saturday mornings, but the satisfaction and the joy and the confidence and the pride I get from the work I'm doing and the support I get from the team I'm a part of and the feeling of community I've got from the people who are showing up alongside me, that is so far greater than what I'm giving up in terms of a late Friday night. That's what you want. If the sacrifice is worthy, then what you're getting in return is greater than what you're sacrificing. That's what I would say. So I'm just throwing that in there. If you're asking people to increase the amount of focus, okay, increase the amount of time that they're giving you, increase the amount of energy they're giving you, or increase the amount of seriousness, which means, hey, I want you to realize that this is important. Or I want to acknowledge the fact that I know you think it's important, and I am now going to give you just as much respect in terms of time and focus on my part as your coach or your teammate, that guess what? Okay, we still have to make sure that by becoming serious and becoming focused, we're not losing the joy, the love, and the fun that is associated with this task. Because you know what? It's running. It's a sport. You're supposed to play it. Don't forget that. Because if you do, it's going to become a job and not a form of play. And guess what? You can play hard. Yes, you can. And if you play hard, guess what? It's not going to feel as hard. That's another little trick that I just snuck in there. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about how to coach teams at some point. If there are coaches out there, we can always do a side episode. All right, so those are kind of the main things that people always assume when they ask a coach, do I need to do more? That we're going to bounce back with, yeah, you need to do more minutes, meters, miles, days of running, or you need to do more intensity. You need to do more strength training. You need to do more focus. But I'll tell you what, it's not always those 4 things. Even though they may be the only 4 things that get mentioned on the survey, they're not the only 4 answers. They're just the 4 things that most athletes think are the answers. And this comes not always at the right moment. I mentioned earlier someone coming up saying like, hey, I've had a lot of progression. I want to keep moving forward because I feel so good and I'm so excited and I'm so motivated. A lot of times this comes when things aren't going well, when your racing isn't going well, when your running doesn't feel like it's going well, where you don't feel good about yourself and you think more has got to be the answer. It's got to be more volume. It's got to be more intensity. It's got to be more strength training. It's got to be the fact that I'm not serious enough, so I have to have more focus and more seriousness in my life. And that's not always the answer. In fact, in those moments, I would say it's rarely the answer that you need to do more of those things. But you probably do need to do more. But like I said at the beginning and hinted at it as the subtitle, it just may not be more of what you think. So what am I talking about? Well, a lot of times when people are not running well, they go through this rut, right? And what usually happens is it follows a groove, which makes total sense. Like you hit like a groove and you're running, things are clicking along, and then suddenly out of nowhere, that groove turns into a rut and you think, what is wrong? Well, maybe I need more intensity. Maybe I need more volume. Maybe the answer is more. Yes, my friend, but it's not more of what you think. A lot of times you're in that rut because you're overtrained, or you're bored with your training, you're lacking inspiration, you're lacking motivation, you don't have a story. Why am I doing this? What am I training for? Or you've lost the thread of the story. Sometimes the answer is not more running. Sometimes it could be more sleep, which is why I always pound the table on, hey, you need to be writing down your story. And when I say writing down your story, what do I always tell you? It's not just about running. It's about your day. It's about your experience. It's about the stressors that you've got in your life. It's about the fun you had during the day that had nothing to do with running. Because if you look back and you realize, you know what? My sleep has been suffering. Well, maybe it's not more running that's going to lead to better running. Maybe it's more sleep. Maybe the training doesn't really have to change. Or if anything, it's actually some less mileage, less meters, less intensity, and more sleep because it's not enough recovery. To put it another way, what you need more of is more recovery. Because a lot of people, when they don't run well, they think it's going to be more running that's going to get them better. Because that's how it works when you start, right? I mean, that's what we teach you, basically. We just don't do a good job of also teaching you that there's a law of diminishing returns. And sometimes the right answer is not always the right answer. In this case, well, when we start running, how do you get better at running? Consistent running. So why, as coaches, do we get surprised when athletes think that the answer to get better is always more running? We have to do a better job as coaches of sharing with athletes that no, the answer is not always more running. Sometimes it's more recovery, which could also mean more easy runs. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe someone who's running 5 or 6 or 7 days a week, because lots of people run 5 or 6 or 7 days a week and they do 2 speed workouts every single week. Maybe the answer is more recovery runs and less speed runs. So maybe you're only doing 1 speed run a week because that's what your body needs. Maybe you're doing no speed runs a week. It's just more recovery runs, because you have a lot of athletes that will push back when you say we need to do less of something. But when you phrase it in a slightly different way of, no, you're focusing on less speed runs, but what I want you to focus on is more recovery runs. That's what I want you to focus on. There's going to be less volume when it comes to the intensity associated with a speed run, but there's going to be more volume associated with the intensity of a recovery run or easy run. So yes, it's some mental gymnastics for some, it's semantics for others, it's the truth no matter what. It means the same thing. It's just some people enjoy having the pill with, a little bit of that gelatin coating, and some people like the pill where it's just kind of, the second you put it in your mouth, it just kind of turns into just like gross aspirin flavor. And you're like, oh, this is horrible. It's up to you. Some people like the gel caplets. It doesn't matter. The point is, it's all the same stuff. The delivery mechanism might be a little bit different, but what's being delivered is the exact same. I'm really happy with this whole thing I just came up with because it makes sense, and I kind of like the way I described it. But anyway, that's one of those examples where you have to, though, have these conversations that go, like I said, not just to the surface. They can't be superficial conversations. So when someone asks, hey, I'm not running very well, do I need to do more mileage? The answer might be yes. You've hit a progression, and then you just plateaued, and guess what? You're ready to take on more volume. You're ready to take on more intensity. But the answer might not be that, which is why I want you to pause, and I want you to be asking yourself or talking a little bit deeper with your coach about these things, because the answer does not always mean more of what you think. Another thing, it could be something like you need more flexibility in your training. Now, this kind of goes to that athlete who's thinking, do I need to focus more? Do I need to be more intense from an emotional or mindset point of view? And the answer is sometimes, actually, it's the opposite. You're too intense. You're not allowing yourself to be flexible enough. There's a rigidity now in your training. There's a rigidity now in your mindset, and we need flexibility. We need what comes with flexibility, which is really the opportunity and the confidence to make adjustments when and if needed. And rigidity in training often shows up in rigidity in racing. It often shows up in rigidity in decision-making, where suddenly we're incapable of making the right decision if the right decision is a new decision that we have to make. If it means that we are going off the page, if we are going outside of the box, and you always want that flexibility. A lot of times people think that the ability to be flexible with decision making means that you're never following through consistently on things, and that is not true whatsoever. What it means is, if the situation dictates that we have to take a new course, we're not going to drive ourselves into a ditch because that's the directions from last time. No, there's a ditch there now, which means we have to circumvent the ditch and take a new route. That's all I'm saying. So flexibility is sometimes the key. And yes, it means flexibility in training. Where last year, it worked 1 tempo a week and we ran 4 days. Okay, well, this week there's different things going on. Why? Because we're a different person. It's a year later. Work life, home life, school life, whatever. As a result, we're now going to be working out once every 2 weeks. Or, as a result, we're going to be doing intensity twice a week because things have changed and you're a much stronger, much more knowledgeable athlete, and you trust yourself to a point where you know how to make adjustments in those speed workouts so we're achieving what we need to achieve. There's a lot of things that go in there, but it all comes down to flexibility. It comes down to the confidence to make decisions when and if needed. Decisions that are different than the decisions we've already made in the past. This is a new day, new decisions. We are okay with rewriting the template of the training that we're doing. So sometimes it's more flexibility that you need. Sometimes it's as simple as you need more fun. We can lose sight of the fact, like I said, this is a sport. We're supposed to be playing running. And what you need is more fun. Because I'll tell you what, if you start increasing mileage, if you start increasing volume, if you start increasing intensity, if you start increasing the pressure, all of these things, listen, in and of themselves are not bad. They're not bad. Having more pressure leads to sometimes a little bit more excitement about what's on the line, more butterflies, more nerves, and it becomes a little bit more passionate on race day weekend. All of these things are great unless they're not. And we have to always go back and say, okay, all of these things should lead to more fun. The more pressure on race day should lead to more fun. The more volume of running we're doing should lead to more fun. It doesn't mean it's always going to be easy. It's definitely not always going to be easy. What it means is it shouldn't always just be getting harder and harder and harder. And if you're asking yourself, like, well, you know what, after a certain point, it becomes less fun. Well, then why are you doing it? Why are you doing it? And follow-up question, why? Why does it mean it has to be less fun? Why? Because what used to be a long run of 5K, that is now 30K, why is 30K less fun? I mean, I'm sure that it's more time. And that's a really deep question that you should be asking yourself. Like, I know a lot of people will say, well, I'm really running because of the sense of accomplishment. Like, I want to be able to say I did a marathon. Well, dig a little bit deeper, you know. Why do you want to run a marathon? And we hinted at this earlier in the show, you know. Well, there's the confidence, there's the joy of, oh, now, wait a minute, I thought it was just the accomplishment. And you start digging a little bit deeper and you realize, oh, I actually do love this. I should love this. But if what you're doing is now diminishing how much you love it, how much fun you're having, how much excitement you have looking forward to what's next, how much pride you have in what you've accomplished already. I mean, these are the things that you've got to ask yourself, right? Another thing, sometimes, which I think is closely associated with more fun, is sometimes you got to take more risks. Yeah, sometimes you got to put yourself out there a little bit more. Sometimes what you really need to do is take a chance on yourself. Take a chance on a goal. And remember, those great goals, they're unreachable when you set them. But if you do the work, you have a really good chance of reaching that goal. But setting a goal that is initially unreachable is a risk. So if you've set a goal before, and it was a good goal, it was an initially unreachable goal, then taking risks is, well, something that you're pretty comfortable with, or at least comfortable enough to try to do. So maybe you're comfortable with being uncomfortable setting those goals, which is also badass and which is also awesome. But sometimes what you need is something that's a little bit riskier than what you've been doing. Because yes, running can get boring if we make it boring. Remember, running in and of itself, I don't think is boring. The runner can become boring. So maybe you are making your running boring. And what you need is not more boring running. What you need is more exciting running. Maybe what you need is not more guaranteed success of, well, I'm going to go for a 5K run because I know I can run 5K. Maybe what you need is something out there that's a little risky. I'm going to try to do something I'm not quite sure I can do, but I think I've got a chance of doing it, which means I'm setting myself up to be in position to potentially fail, which is exciting and risky. The risk of failure, that's something you always want sprinkled in your training. Not the guarantee of failure, the risk of failure. Because anytime you're sprinkling the risk of failure on your training, you're also sprinkling what? The risk of success. Right? There we go. All right, just a couple more things, because what you might need more of is free time away from me. So I'm going to try to wrap this up. But we do have a Mindset Minute. I just want you to know we have a Mindset Minute coming up. Okay, a couple other things you might need more of are, well, just I'm going to give you one that should make you excited, but for some runners, it's hard to hear. Days off. Yeah, sometimes if you want to get better, you're going to need more just days off, like not running. I'm sorry. Like that's just the reality. There are people out there, definitely 100%, that if they want to run better, whether that means further, faster, or with more joy, with more passion, with more energy, you need some days off. Now, there are people out there that are on streaks. There are people that can navigate running 7 days a week, week after week after week after week. But guess what? Everyone's not the same, okay? So if you're one of those people, it's like, I've been running every single day for 9 years. Good for you. Maybe you need a day off. Maybe you don't. My point is, maybe you do. And for the people out there wondering, like, well, I run, like only 4 days a week. 3 days a week I'm taking a day off. Well, you might need an extra day off every week. You may need an extra day off every 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks. The point is, you have to seriously consider, do you need more in terms of days running, or do you need more days not running? Okay? That's all. You just got to ask yourself. And this is the thing. It's not a sign of weakness to do the right thing. It is always the sign of strength to do the right thing. So if what you need to do, if what the right thing to do is to take more days off, that is a sign of strength. Strength is a good thing for runners. So you're working that strength attribute every time you make a right decision. And if the day off is the right decision, you got better as a runner. Period. Full stop. Send that telegram. All right. The last thing I'm going to bring up is sometimes all a runner needs is more knowledge. That's it. They need to know more about the sport. And there's a lot of different things to know about the sport. There's, yes, the training background of coaching and stuff, and understanding, how you structure a week, and, how you put together an interval workout, and how do you, increase your volume intelligently, and how you put together a strength training routine. Yes, there's all of that. There's also just knowing more about yourself as a runner. There's also knowing more about the history of the sport. There's more that you could know about the heritage of the sport. There's more that you could know about the culture of the sport. There's more that you could know just about your community of runners that are around you, whether that's literally around you in like a locale sense, like in your city, in your town, but also in the world. There's so much knowledge about the sport that maybe that's what you need to push you forward. And guess what? It may be something different in a month, 10 months, 2 years, where it's more of something different. Maybe it's not the knowledge aspect. Maybe it's the more days off. Maybe it is the more mileage. Maybe it is the intensity. Maybe it is more recovery. Maybe it's more sleep. There's so many different things. And as you can imagine, I could have brought up another 200 different things that you need more of. More laughter. Because laughter is, I think, an absolutely essential ingredient to great training. It's an absolutely essential ingredient. It could be more laughter. There are so many different things. It could be more fluids. It could be more fuel. There's so many different things. The point is, it doesn't always have to be more minutes, meters, miles, intensity, strength training, or focus and seriousness. It can be so many other things that you need more of. The key is, whatever you're adding to your training, whatever you're adding to your running, whatever you're increasing more of, it should lead to you feeling like you are becoming more of who you are meant to be, that you are becoming more wholly you, WHOLLY. If you're adding things to your training, if you're adding things to your responsibilities and obligations, and it's making you feel like a lesser version of you, less of who you really are, less of who you are meant to be, then you're doing the wrong things, okay? All right, we've got a Mindset Minute here with the one, the only, the extraordinary mindset coach that we all know and love, coming in, swooping in to give us a Mindset Minute. Let me hand the baton off right now to Coach Bennett the Greater. That's Tammy from the Show Up Society. Take it over, Coach.
My Mindset Minute for you is to do more talking nicely to yourself. So I challenge you, after you listen to this podcast, to spend 1 minute finding something that you are proud of yourself for from the last day or two. So something you've overcome, something you've tried that you never tried before, something you learned, something you did even though you didn't really want to. The point is to do more work finding things to be proud of yourself about. Our brains love to point out all the things that we're not doing good enough, or that we're not doing well, or we're not finishing, or we're not doing fast enough or more enough. Our brains are really good at finding that. So I want you to spend more time looking for and finding the things that you are doing well. I promise you, there are always things. So make this a daily habit or a nightly habit. It's a great way to wrap up the day, to look back and see the things that you did do.
As always, crushes it. I mean, it's ridiculous. Just comes in. And listen, I'll give you a little behind the scenes. Usually what happens is I walk by her when it looks like she's not doing anything, and she's probably doing something at least in her head. But I come in and I say, hey, could you do a Mindset Minute? And she says, yes. And then she goes in and says, what's the episode about? I give her like a 30 seconds little like overview, and then she goes in and crushes it. So it's kind of actually annoying. I mean, like, it's good for all of you. It's annoying for me to see how easily she does it. But anyway, that's a show. That's episode 74. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for listening. As always, thank you for subscribing. Thank you for sending in those ratings and reviews. I'm going to read some next week because a whole bunch came in the last 2 weeks. So if you haven't done a rating or review, please put it in there, because I may be reading your review or your rating next week. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for sharing the show. And as always, until next time, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and I'll meet you on the next starting line. Thank you so much for listening to Coach Bennett's podcast today. And if you're not already following or subscribed to the podcast on whatever platform you're listening, well, I really wish you would, because it helps a lot. Also, check out the show notes, because you'll find a link to Coach Bennett's newsletter, as well as all the social media sites that I'm on. Places like Threads and Facebook and Instagram and Mastodon and YouTube, and even the artist formerly known as Twitter. Whatever that dumpster fire is called today, you'll find a link to it, because I'm on there. Thank you so much again for listening, and until next time, take care of yourself.